It is the longest road on Earth, a single highway system stretching 30,000 kilometers from the frozen tundra of Alaska to the southernmost tip of South America, crossing deserts, jungles, mountains, and 14 countries without ever technically ending. How do you build a drivable road across an active volcanic mountain range reaching 69.0 meters? How does a single highway system pass through the world's driest desert and the world's densest jungle on the same continent? And why, after 90 years of construction effort across 14 nations, does a 160-kilometer gap still exist in the middle of it, deliberately left unfinished? The answers involve engineering decisions made across 5 completely different geological zones simultaneously. A biosecurity barrier protecting a $75 billion industry, and a gap so ecologically sensitive that governments across 6 decades have concluded an unfinished highway is safer than a completed one. You think you know what a road is. The Pan American Highway is something else entirely. Let's start with the raw numbers, because the scale of what has been built here makes every other road project in history look modest by comparison. The Pan American Highway system stretches approximately 30,000 kilometers in total length, the longest motorable road in the world, recognized by the Guinness World Records. 30,000 kilometers, that is 3/4 of the full circumference of the Earth at the equator. Driven continuously at 100 kilometers per hour without stopping for fuel, food, or sleep, it would take approximately 300 consecutive hours to complete. That is 12.5 continuous days of non-stop driving. The highway passes through 14 countries: Canada, the United States, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. 14 countries, 14 different legal systems, 14 different border crossing protocols, 14 different national road maintenance standards, all theoretically connected by a single continuous route. In practice, road quality varies from 8-lane interstate highway in the United States to unpaved gravel track in remote sections of Guatemala and the Peruvian highlands. The highway crosses the Andes Mountains, the world's longest continental mountain range at approximately 7,000 kilometers at multiple points along the route. The Pan American crosses the Andes at elevations reaching 4,853 meters above sea level at Ticlio Pass in Peru, higher than the summit of Mont Blanc, the highest peak in the Alps at 48.8 meters. At these altitudes, atmospheric oxygen concentration drops to approximately 55% of sea level values, low enough to cause acute altitude sickness in unacclimatized travelers within hours of arrival, and to reduce diesel engine combustion efficiency by approximately 40%. The highway crosses the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, the driest non-polar desert on Earth. The Atacama receives an average of less than 1 millimeter of rainfall per year across its driest sections. Some weather monitoring stations in the Atacama's core have recorded 0 measurable rainfall for periods exceeding 400 consecutive years. The highway through this region requires essentially no drainage infrastructure. The primary road maintenance challenge is wind erosion and sand drift across the pavement surface, not water damage. The total construction cost of the Pan American Highway system across all countries and all phases of construction exceeds $30 billion in current values. $30 billion spread across 14 countries, 90 years of construction timelines, and approximately 30,000 kilometers of road, averaging approximately $1 million per kilometer of completed highway. For comparison, urban highway construction in the United States currently costs between $10 and $50 million per kilometer. The Pan American was built at a small fraction of this cost across some of the most physically demanding terrain on Earth. The highway system currently carries an estimated 50 million vehicle crossings per year across the full network of international border points it connects. 50 million crossings annually. That is more international vehicle movements than any other road system in the Western Hemisphere, carrying agricultural produce, manufactured goods, fuel, livestock, and passengers between 14 national economies in a continuous flow that never fully stops. So how do you actually build a road across terrain this extreme? The engineering answer depends entirely on which of the 5 completely different geological environments you are working in. The Andes sections represent the most severe structural engineering challenge on the entire route. Mountain road construction at 4,000 to 5,000 meters above sea level requires solving 3 simultaneous problems: extreme slope gradients, freeze-thaw cycle pavement damage, and severely reduced equipment performance in thin air. Standard highway gradients are limited to approximately 6%, a rise of 6 meters for every 100 meters of horizontal distance traveled. The Andean sections of the Pan American regularly exceed 10% gradients, and some critical mountain passes require 12 to 15% gradients, where topography offers no alternative routing. At a 12% gradient, a fully loaded freight truck climbing through the Peruvian Andes consumes approximately 3 times the fuel per kilometer compared to level highway operation. Braking distances on the descent increase by approximately 40% compared to equivalent speeds on level road. Runaway truck ramps, emergency escape ramps filled with deep loose gravel that bring out-of-control vehicles to a stop through resistance, are required at intervals of 5 to 8 kilometers on major Andean descents, because brake fade from sustained downhill braking is a documented regular occurrence on these gradients. Think of the engineering challenge as building a drivable surface on the side of a 700-kilometer staircase, covered in ice for 6 months per year, that must simultaneously support 40-ton trucks moving in both directions at all hours. The freeze-thaw cycle at high altitude is the single largest cause of road surface deterioration across the Andean sections. Water infiltrates small surface cracks in asphalt during warmer daytime temperatures, then freezes overnight and expands by approximately 9% in volume, widening each crack mechanically from within. Over a single winter season, this process transforms minor surface cracking into potholes 30 centimeters deep, requiring complete resurfacing. Peruvian highway sections above 3,000 meters require full resurfacing approximately every 5 to 7 years, compared to 15 to 20 years for equivalent lowland roads, purely as a result of freeze-thaw cycle degradation, accelerated by the altitude's extreme day-night temperature swings. At the opposite extreme, the Alaskan and northern Canadian sections face permafrost ground that has been continuously frozen for up to 30,000 years in some locations. Permafrost road construction requires solving a paradox. The road surface is warmer than the frozen ground beneath it, and if that warmth conducts into the permafrost, the ground melts, destabilizes, and the road sinks unevenly and collapses. Alaskan sections of the Pan American use gravel insulation, pads 1 to 2 meters thick between the road surface and the permafrost below, thick enough to prevent thermal conduction from warming the frozen ground during summer. As Arctic climate warming accelerates permafrost thaw at rates that were not anticipated in original road design specifications, sections of Alaskan highway are deforming at increasing rates. The Alaska Department of Transportation spends approximately $35 million annually on permafrost-related road repairs, a figure that has increased by approximately 25% per decade as warming accelerates. Surprising fact number 1. The Pan American through Chile runs approximately 1,200 kilometers through the Atacama with almost no curves, straight lines extending beyond the visual horizon in both directions. The terrain is so geometrically flat that engineers could route the road in virtually straight lines for hundreds of kilometers without encountering natural obstacles. Drivers on this section document extreme monotony-induced fatigue, road hypnosis, from total absence of visual variation. Chile's highway authority has installed rumble strips, flashing warning lights, and mandatory rest area stops at regular intervals specifically to prevent drivers from falling asleep on a perfectly straight road in perfect visibility under a cloudless sky. Surprising fact number 2. The El Salvador section of the Pan American records approximately 12 traffic fatalities per 100 million vehicle kilometers, roughly 4 times the fatality rate of equivalent sections in the United States. Contributing factors include road surface quality, mixed traffic combining heavy freight trucks with pedestrians, cyclists, and free-roaming livestock, and enforcement limitations on vehicle safety standards. El Salvador's section carries disproportionate traffic volume relative to its road quality, because it provides the only viable land route connecting Central America's most densely populated country to its regional trade partners. Surprising fact number 3. At the highest Pan-American crossing in Peru, diesel truck engines produce approximately 40% less power than at sea level due to oxygen-thin air reducing combustion efficiency. Trucking companies operating Andean routes use specially modified high-altitude engine calibration software and turbocharger systems that compress thin air to near sea level density before injection into the combustion chamber. Without these modifications, a standard sea-level truck engine produces insufficient power to maintain minimum legal highway speed on Andean gradients, creating dangerous situations where heavy vehicles slow to near-walking speeds on steep climbs, blocking road sections for extended periods. The Darién Gap is where the Pan American Highway stops, and the engineering, biological, and political reasons behind this gap reveal more about the real limits of infrastructure development than any completed section does. The Darién Gap is a 160-kilometer stretch of roadless jungle and swamp straddling the border between Panama and Colombia. It is one of the most physically impenetrable and ecologically dense terrestrial environments on Earth. The Darién region receives approximately 3,000 to 4,000 millimeters of rainfall annually, 4 times the annual rainfall of London, and sufficient to sustain a lowland rainforest with canopy heights reaching 40 meters. Beneath the canopy, the terrain consists of river systems, swamps, and unstable alluvial soils that cannot support conventional road foundations without continuous maintenance, so intensive it approaches the cost of complete annual road reconstruction. A Colombian government engineering assessment in the 1970s estimated construction costs through the Darién at approximately $1 billion per kilometer of completed road, the highest cost per unit length ever seriously proposed for any road project in history. Logistics compound the geological challenge to an extreme degree. The Darién has no existing road network for delivering construction equipment. All machinery would need to be airlifted in by heavy transport helicopter or transported by river barge through channel depths that change seasonally. Equipment delivery costs alone added approximately 300 to 400% to standard construction logistics expenses in every survey conducted. A joint Colombian-American engineering survey completed in 1974 concluded the Darién Gap section was technically feasible but economically unjustifiable. Their report estimated 8 to 10 years of construction for a road requiring complete replacement within 15 years of opening due to jungle degradation rates, a construction-to-replacement cycle that produces no permanent infrastructure return on investment. The biological argument against completion is equally powerful. The Darién Gap currently functions as a natural disease barrier, preventing foot-and-mouth disease, endemic in South American cattle populations, from spreading into Central and North America, where it has been eradicated. Foot-and-mouth disease cannot spread across 160 kilometers of roadless jungle between Colombian and Panamanian cattle herds. A completed road would allow cattle trucks to cross the gap within hours, introducing foot-and-mouth into the North American cattle industry, valued at approximately $75 billion annually. The United States Department of Agriculture has formally and consistently opposed Darién Gap completion on foot-and-mouth biosecurity grounds since the 1970s, an opposition that carries significant weight in any serious completion proposal. The gap has also become the primary overland migration corridor for people traveling from South America toward North America. In 2023, approximately 520,000 migrants crossed the Darién Gap on foot, a 70% increase from 2022 and a 1,500% increase compared to 2019 crossing numbers. The crossing takes an average of 5 to 7 days through terrain where humanitarian organizations document consistent fatalities from drowning, falls, and violence. Armed criminal organizations control access routes and charge migrants fees, ranging from $300 to $1,000 per person for guidance through the jungle. A completed road would fundamentally alter the economics and physical safety of this migration, in directions that have not produced policy consensus among any of the governments involved. Some argue a road would save lives by replacing a deadly jungle crossing with a managed road corridor. Others argue it would dramatically increase total migration volume by reducing the physical deterrent the jungle crossing currently represents. The gap has remained unfinished for 90 years, not because it cannot be built, because the combined economic, ecological, epidemiological, and geopolitical consequences of completing it have consistently been judged worse than the consequences of leaving it incomplete. Now let's get into the facts that most people who have driven sections of this highway have never known. First, no person has ever completed a fully documented non-stop drive of the Pan American Highway's passable sections in a single continuous journey. The passable road sections alone cover approximately 29,840 kilometers, at a sustained average speed of 80 kilometers per hour, accounting for mountain sections, border crossings, and urban areas. Continuous driving would require approximately 373 hours without any stop. That is 15.5 consecutive days of driving without sleep, fuel stops, or rest. Multiple documented attempts at record crossings have required support teams, vehicle changes, and medical monitoring throughout. The fastest documented complete journey, including the required sea crossing of the Darién Gap, was completed in approximately 23 days and 23 hours in 1987, using a specially prepared vehicle with a rotating driver team. No solo driver in a standard production vehicle has replicated this time. Second, the Pan American passes within 100 kilometers of 22 separate active volcanoes along its full route. 22 active volcanoes, Mexico's Popocatépetl, rising to 5,426 meters, and one of the most continuously active volcanoes in North America, sits approximately 70 kilometers from the Pan American route through central Mexico. Guatemala's highway section passes within 15 kilometers of Volcán de Fuego, which has erupted over 60 times since 1999. In June 2018, a single fuego eruption killed 159 people and deposited 1 meter of volcanic ash across nearby road sections, closing the Pan American through this region for 11 days. Third, the road surface in the Atacama sections reaches temperatures of 70 degrees Celsius during peak summer months. 70 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cause degree burns on skin contact in seconds. Standard asphalt softens and deforms at approximately 60 degrees Celsius, meaning pavement in these sections develops load-induced rutting under heavy truck traffic during peak summer temperatures, even though the desert receives virtually no rainfall. Chile's highway maintenance program budgets specifically for summer thermal deformation repair in Atacama sections, a maintenance category that exists on no other highway system in the world. Fourth, Peru experiences approximately 400 earthquakes per year, registering above magnitude 3, and the Pan American runs alongside this seismically active coastline for over 2,000 kilometers. In August 2007, an 8-magnitude earthquake struck the Ica region of coastal Peru, releasing energy approximately equivalent to 476 Hiroshima nuclear weapons, and damaged Pan-American highway sections across 300 kilometers of the route simultaneously. Full repair and restoration of traffic capacity required 18 months of continuous work at a documented cost of approximately $800 million. Seismic reinforcement of bridges and overpasses along the Peruvian section has been an ongoing program costing approximately $200 million per decade since 2007. Fifth, and here is the most contested dimension of the entire highway project. The completion of the Darién Gap is now actively debated not as an engineering or economic question, but as a global biodiversity and climate policy question. Research from deforested regions of South America consistently demonstrates that roads are the primary driver of tropical deforestation. Over 90% of Amazon deforestation occurs within 5 kilometers of an existing road. A completed Darién road connecting 2 continental road networks would open access to hundreds of thousands of hectares of currently roadless primary forest in Colombia's Choco region, one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the Western Hemisphere, home to approximately 11,000 plant species and 600 bird species found nowhere else on Earth. Colombian Environmental Ministry assessments have projected that road completion through the Darién could trigger deforestation of 40 to 60% of the adjacent Choco forest within 20 years of opening, following exactly the deforestation patterns documented in equivalent Amazonian regions after road construction. Proponents of completion, primarily Colombian regional development advocates, argue that the Darién province has been economically abandoned for a century while the rest of the country developed, and that road access would deliver healthcare, education, agricultural markets, and economic opportunity to communities currently accessible only by river or air. The Colombian government remains internally divided. The Environmental Ministry opposes completion. The Transport and Regional Development Ministries support it. International environmental organizations have made Darién Gap preservation a specific advocacy priority. No resolution is in sight after 9 decades of intermittent debate. So here is what the Pan-American Highway actually is, stated without reduction. 30,000 kilometers of road crossing 14 countries, 5 climate zones, the world's driest desert, the highest paved passes in the Western Hemisphere, 22 active volcanoes, the most seismically active continental coastline on Earth, Arctic permafrost that has been frozen for 30,000 years, and mountain gradients so steep they require emergency runaway truck ramps every 8 kilometers, built over 90 years at a cost exceeding $30 billion, carrying 50 million vehicle crossings annually, and still incomplete by 160 kilometers, because those 160 kilometers are simultaneously too expensive to build, too ecologically destructive to justify, too biosecurely dangerous to risk, and too politically contested to resolve. No other infrastructure project in human history spans this range of environments, this number of political boundaries, this diversity of engineering challenges, or this length of construction timeline. The Pan American is not a road in the conventional sense. It is a 90-year negotiation between human ambition and the physical and biological limits of a planet that does not always cooperate. The gap at the Darién is not an engineering failure. It is a documented engineering decision made repeatedly by multiple governments over 6 decades that some connections carry consequences that exceed their benefits. Here is the question worth sitting with. If engineers have successfully built 29,840 kilometers of road across Arctic permafrost, the world's driest desert, 48 53-meter Andean mountain passes, active volcanic zones, and one of the world's most seismically active coastlines, and then chose not to build the final 160 kilometers because the ecological and biosecurity consequences were judged unacceptable. What does that tell us about the relationship between what engineering is capable of and what engineering should actually do? Maybe the most significant engineering decision of the last century on this highway was not how to cross the Andes. Maybe it was knowing when to stop. If this changed how you see the world, hit subscribe. We uncover the truth behind things you thought you already knew. Right now, somewhere on 30,000 kilometers of the longest road on Earth, a truck is crossing a 48-53-meter Andean pass with brakes approaching their thermal limit. A driver is fighting road hypnosis on a 1,200-kilometer straight line through a desert that hasn't seen rain in 400 years. And at the southern edge of Panama, the road ends at a wall of jungle. 520,000 people crossed that jungle last year on foot. The road does not go there. It was decided that it shouldn't.